So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome attendees, and thank everyone for joining us this evening to learn more about the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance District, also known as LLMDs number 11, Paradise Valley, and number 13, North Cordelia. Chris, if you get a moment, let's go ahead and pull up our presentation that we have tonight for the residents. Thank you. So tonight, hopefully everyone can hear me okay too as well. A quick check. We're here to have a discussion regarding the LLMDs and hear potential funding options. But before we dive into the program, I'd like to go over some Zoom logistics so that we're able to participate during the meeting. Go ahead, next slide. So real quickly, and most folks have participated over the last year or so, these Zoom meetings, we have all of the microphones muted, and that's intended to prevent any background noise or disruptions during this presentation. If you have questions or comments while the presentation you're hearing tonight, please type those utilizing the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. At the end of the meeting, we'll go through those questions. If you'd like to instead speak during the interactive question and answer session, please raise your hand, use that function, or press *6 on your phone to request to speak. If there are any related questions that we cannot answer or address, the team will research and provide a response on the project website. Next slide, Chris. So we've made some changes last minute to our program tonight, so I'd like to go over our agenda here briefly. I'm going to go over our introductions of the city team. Our Public Works Director will provide a few opening remarks. I'll go over the services provided by the LLMDs. Our City Attorney will run through the funding options available. We'll review the district budgets and assessment levels, and we've provided time at the end for questions. So joining us this evening, we have David Lim. He's our acting city attorney. Paul Koschel, our director of public works. Chris Lewis, our management analyst too. Marisa Kumpion, she's our senior management analyst. Representing our operations division, Gary Sponsler, our landscape maintenance supervisor, and Richard Vasquez, he's our landscape maintenance supervisor as well. Oh, and I'm Ryan Punganiban. I'm the assistant public works director and city engineer. And so with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Paul, who's going to provide a little bit of background and history on why we're here tonight.
Thanks, Ryan, and good evening, everyone. And thanks so much for joining us tonight. Again, I'm Paul Koschel. I'm the Director of Public Works at the city. And so I just wanted to start us off with a little bit of background and information. Give you a brief overview of why we're here tonight. And in short, it's really to share some background information with you and then get your feedback. So at the December 21st council meeting, there was an item on the agenda for the council to consider new landscape maintenance contracts for several districts, including North Cordelia and Paradise Valley. And due to maintenance costs exceeding the available revenues, the new contracts included reduced landscape maintenance services to arrive at a balanced budget. We heard from several residents at that council meeting who expressed some concern with the proposed reduction of services. And so to avoid a lapse in landscape maintenance, the city council ultimately approved the landscape maintenance contracts at that council meeting. However, the council also directed staff to explore funding options that would allow maintenance to return to the prior level of service. So since that time, the city attorney's office has helped us explore those options, and they've developed some options for the city council's consideration at the next city council meeting, which is on February 1st. However, before that council meeting, we wanted to conduct this town hall meeting to share the information with all of you, the residents of these maintenance districts, and then also give you, of course, the opportunity to provide input and ask questions. And so with that, again, thanks again for spending a part of your evening with us tonight. And I'll hand the mic back over to Ryan.
Thanks, Paul. So a couple of foundational things before we dive into the specifics on the assessment. So what is a landscape and lighting maintenance district? It is an assessment district created by local government agencies pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. These LLMDs can fund installation and annual maintenance of landscaping, public lighting, sidewalks, curbs and gutter, and park or recreational improvements. So at the time of formation, there is a prescribed process that needs to be completed, and that includes appropriate planning and assessment engineering, an engineer's report, a public hearing, and a protest ballot for affected landowners. A finding of benefit is also required. So let's dive in more specifically to the public improvements eligible for maintenance. This slide provides a brief visual of the components currently being maintained within the Paradise Valley North District. So these include all streetlights and landscaping in the medians on both sides of the Paradise Valley Drive loop. So also streetlights and landscaping along improved sections of Manuel Campos Parkway just east of Dover Avenue. And finally, the entry signage and medians feeding off of Paradise Valley Drive. So shifting gears to LLMD number 13, or North Cordelia. This district is a little bit larger than Paradise Valley in comparison, and includes all landscaping in median areas and in parkway strips along Green Valley Road, Business Center Drive, Sassoon Valley, and Mangles Boulevard. The district also covers maintenance along landscape trails and pathways. So as Paul alluded to, the focus of our discussion tonight is regarding the recent reduction in landscape service within the districts. Over the past couple of years, there has been a significant increase in district expenses, which are primarily attributed to landscape maintenance cost. This is a result of shortage in labor and sharp increases in maintenance prices. Additionally, water service and consumption has incrementally risen. So conversely, our maximum assessment rate, which Chris is going to touch on later in our presentation, to generate revenue has ultimately remained unchanged for several years. And there is no built-in automatic inflators in several instances. So with this impending budget shortfall, the district could no longer sustain the same level of maintenance service. So over the last several weeks, there has been a few questions and comments that have been trickling in regarding what this reduced landscape service would look like. So on this slide here, we've tried to articulate the work into three categories. Priority level 1 work is essential to keep hazards. So for example, down limbs and trees blocking lines of sight. These will need to occur. And for this reason, this service is still going to be provided. Conversely, on the other end of the spectrum, the maintenance contracts have been reduced, that all work included within what we've classified as priority level 3 work, such as replanting shrubs or trees, irrigation and bark replacement, have in essence been eliminated. So a key note to point out for our priority level 2 work is the fertilization and pre-emergent or weed control will not be provided with this reduced contract. So now I'm going to hand it off to David Lim to talk through some of the funding options to provide the same level of landscape maintenance service within the districts.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is David Lim. I'm the acting city attorney for the City of Fairfield. I want to start by giving you a very brief overview of Proposition 218 and how it relates to the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance Act of 1972, and specifically with your particular districts. So the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance District was created by the legislature in 1972, and Proposition 218 was not put into place until the 1990s, I believe it was 1996. So for almost 24 years, there was no Proposition 218. And under the way that the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance Act was put into place, it allowed cities to establish a policy to impose assessment fees to particular districts that they created to allow for, maintenance, landscape maintenance, and lighting. In 1991, well, let me go back a little further. Landscape and lighting maintenance districts for the particular districts we're talking about today were formed in the late 80s and early 90s, so 1989 and 1990 for these two particular districts. In 1991, the City Council adopted a resolution known as Resolution 91-213B to establish a policy for the development, maintenance, and financing standards for residential maintenance districts. In short, it basically laid out the policy whereby assessments would be apportioned to these particular landscape and lighting maintenance districts. Prior to Proposition 218, there was very little oversight in how a city council could apportion those assessments. With 218, which was sort of a way to fill a gap in Proposition 13, which had to do with property tax assessments, 218 basically said that you couldn't make these assessments where they dealt with special assessments to homeowners without first allowing homeowners to have a say in whether or not they agreed to those assessments. So basically putting it to a vote. So now under 218, the city has to go through what's called the 218 process before they make assessments for special assessments in the landscape and lighting district before they can make those additional assessments. Now, where it gets a little tricky is under 218, the city has to first differentiate between what are called general benefits versus special benefits. And special benefits are those benefits in a landscape and lighting district that only benefit a specific piece of property or a specific group of properties. Whereas general benefits are those benefits that help the community at large. And those, if it's deemed to be a general benefit, then it's okay to use general funds to help fund those properties or help fund those particular uses. And sorry, I'm jumping back and forth between the agenda report and the case law that I'm looking at, which is why I'm sort of taking some time. Under the resolution 91-213B, the City Council basically said that a general fund contribution covered city general and administrative expenses, interior street lights, arterial street lights, and arterial median maintenance, meaning kind of the medians. The reason, if you think about it, just in kind of plain English, it makes sense because landscape and maintenance along the arterial medians of streets and along the streets have a general benefit because they keep our streets safe. Anybody driving through your neighborhood or driving through any city streets are kept safe by having those medians maintained, and therefore they're allowed to use general funds to do that. I should also mention that that resolution from 1991 mirrors a provision of the State and Highway Code 22657, which basically says the same thing. Now, what's important to note, where we're kind of going with all this, is that there are provisions under Resolution 91-213B and the State and Highway Code, and I'll read it to you verbatim, that says, if any district has a deficit, the City Council may determine upon a recommendation by the Maintenance District Committee to enter into an agreement to loan money to the district with the stipulation that such money will be paid off with interest based on the city's cost of funds within a specified term of 3 to 5 years. So basically, the City Council does have the authority upon a recommendation from the Maintenance District Committee, which the city has, to give a loan to a district to cover any deficit that appears because of the inability of that district to meet funds. There is also a section that says the City Council may, at their discretion, make contributions to districts from the general fund to cover the cost of providing services determined not just to benefit the district, but the city at large. And then the city in the resolution 91-213B identified those general funds to include the ones that I mentioned, including the arterial median maintenance. Okay. The confusing part of all this, and the reason why you have a lawyer telling you all about this, is because 218 did not exist when the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance Act of 1972 came in, which is why a lot of times people ask, well, why can't the city just, fund it on their own? Why do we need to go through this process? Or why can't they just put money into the Landscape and Lighting District? And the short answer is, if it is for a special benefit that affects only that particular district and the properties in that particular district, then you have to go through the 218 process. That's the easiest way that I can explain it. Next slide, please. So with that background, and I realize that I've given you, a lot of law in like a very short period of time. So I'm happy to answer questions that people might have. Staff has come up with various options. Now, you're going to hear about 3 options tonight, and each option has an option A and an option B. The only difference between the option A and the option B is option A has a procedure whereby staff will go through and conduct what's called an expedited community engagement process pursuant to Prop 218, meaning that the staff is going to speed up the 218 election process to still have community outreach, but as opposed to it taking anywhere from 12 to 18 months to do the 218 process, it's going to be expedited to get done in a 4 to 6 month process. Okay, that's option A, is the expedited process under 218. Option B in each of these 3 options is going to be what we call the full community engagement process, which takes a little bit longer. So option 1A would be where the council authorizes the use of general fund money as a loan. So going back to what I talked about with the resolution from 1991 and the Streets and Highways Code, the City Council is authorized upon a recommendation from the Landscape Committee to use general fund money as a loan to the districts to cover the period from May 1st to June 30th, or May 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2022. Under option A, the city will then go through an expedited process under 218 to try to fund your districts to the full level, which will then allow your districts to pay back the loan floated by the City Council. And then under option 1A, it would be an expedited loan 218 process. Under option 1B, it would be the more standard 218 process that would take a little bit longer. Next slide, please. Under option 2A and 2B, the City Council would authorize the use of general fund money to fund the public improvement. So it wouldn't be a loan, it would be basically a contribution into the district. And then the staff, the city would then conduct either an expedited 218 process or the full normal 218 process. Next slide, please. Option 3 is that the council does what they already decided to do and what staff recommended in December, which is to take no action and leave the budgets the way they are, but either under option 3A, go with the expedited process, or under 3B, go through the full community process. Kind of the pros and cons of each, we can talk about little, but that's really going to be what the council is going to be kind of weighing. What are the pros and cons of each of these various options? Under option 1, with the loan option, one of the pros is that you're able to get the maintenance levels back up to where they were before we had this deficit. The cons are if the districts don't approve the 218 process, then the city could be left with a hole in its general fund, which could have an impact on services citywide. Okay, because you're basically digging into the general fund, and if it's not repaid, someone's going to have to potentially lose out on some services somewhere else. The city council will have to make decisions in the budgeting process potentially that would affect, services somewhere else. As to option 2, the pros are obviously you get the funding for the district that brings you back to the levels that you need for landscape maintenance. Obviously, the cons here are it's not a question of is there going to be an impact to the general fund? There will be an impact to the general fund. basically because general fund money is going to be used to fund this district that could otherwise be used either as a reserve or to fund some other projects within the city. And then option 3 was already discussed on December 31st. The pros are that the general fund is kept safe. There's no danger either from a loan or a contribution to impact other programs in the city. But obviously the downside is that these landscape districts that are affected with a budget short or a fiscal budget shortfall are not going to get funded and could have impact on the overall aesthetics and safety through landscaping. Right now, obviously it's up to the council to make that final decision as to which of these 3 options they want to take, if any. Staff is leaning towards option 1A, which is a loan and an expedited 218 process. We think that's the best of all possible worlds. It sort of is a nice balance between getting these districts funded to be able to cover the landscaping needs of your community, but also gives an option to get that money back into the general fund for the benefit of the entire city. And that's all I have, Ryan, so I'll kick it back over to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Lewis, Management Analyst with the Department of Public Works. And in this portion of the presentation, we're going to go over each district separately, actually, since there's different assessment rates and different budgets and loan amounts that is affecting each district. So I'll start off with Paradise Valley first, and then I'll move into North Cordelia. So we'll go ahead and talk about the current assessment rate as it is right now. I'll give you a little bit of a 5-year history of revenues and expenditures. I'll give you a projection of revenues and expenditures and some potential changes over the next couple years, depending on which option that council directs staff to proceed with on February 1st. I do want to make a note, and I'll probably mention this a couple times throughout the time that I'm speaking, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows that all of the actuals that's presented, so the actual data from fiscal year 16-17 through 2021, that's accurate information. That's based on, actual revenues and expenditures that was flowing in and out of the fund. However, the projections that are being presented to you today are based on the information that staff has available to us at this time. So some of this may change once we get the final engineer's report from our consultant, either later on this, in a couple months or later on this year. But we had to make some assumptions in order to provide these projections to you. Among those assumptions are that we would receive, pretty much all of the assessments that we are budgeting for. So there's no delinquent assessments in the next couple years. We're also assuming that the special versus general benefit calculations that David was talking about. So the special benefit being the special benefit calculation being the portion that the residence is paying, and the general benefit calculation being the portion that the general fund is paying, is going to have little to no change with this new engineer's report that is the basis of this district and dictates the assessment rates and the budgets and the improvements that's being taken care of, et cetera. The also major assumption that we had to build into these projections are the scope and cost of landscaping services that are based on the fiscal year 2021 levels of service and costs of service that we previously received. So moving forward with that, I'll go ahead and just start with Paradise Valley. So for Paradise Valley, the rate in this district was established in 1995. That rate is $190 per parcel or per unit. I throw in the per unit rate because the retirement community is technically sitting on one parcel, but each unit is being charged at the $190 rate. And so assessment revenue for this district is approximately $260,000 per year. Over the past 5 years, expenses have exceeded revenue anywhere from $30,000 in fiscal year 16-17 to nearly $70,000 in fiscal year 19-20. This graphical representation, shows you the blue line is our revenues and our orange line is the expenses. The increase in revenue you see there in 17-18, a little bit in 18-19, that's marked by the new developments, specifically Paradise 360 and the extension that's going in. Maybe we collected a little more of the delinquent assessments that we didn't collect in the prior years. But we can, bet on about the $260,000 average revenue intake. When the reduction of services was proposed to council back in June, when we first, I guess one of the first times that we were alerting them to the need to reduce these services, that wasn't an effort to right size the budget. So you'll see that right here, the projections for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23, we were attempting to really get that cushion between our, have our revenues exceed our expenditures for one, give us a little cushion for any unexpected repairs or maintenance items that we might need to take care of, and really help us ensure that we keep our fund, the reserves in the black for this district. This is just a chart version of the revenue and expenses you just saw on the previous graph. So included in this chart, though, I do have the net of the revenues and expenses listed here. I also have the fund balance or the reserves for the district at the end of any given fiscal year. So to just walk you through one of the fiscal years here, the net between the revenues and expenses was a negative $30,000. We overspent. We had an ending fund balance of about $154,000 at the end of fiscal year 16-17. Likewise, in 17-18, we overspent by about $40,000. And so that ate into the 154, which is what brought us down to the 114 at the end of that year. So on and so forth, leads us to last fiscal year of 2021. We were ending the year with about only $3,000 in our reserves, which, as you can probably guess, that's really not enough cushion to provide us, with any extras for unexpected repairs or anything that might come up throughout the end of throughout the year. So in 21-22, we proposed to council and it was accepted that we would reduce those services. And that's what you're seeing in these projections right here for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23. We gave ourselves a little bit, about a $15,000 cushion, and we start to build up these fund balances to give us a nice, comfortable, fund to fall back on. So if council directs that there should be no loan or contribution, so basically if they direct that it should be options 3A or 3B, this is what your projections will look like, what it means for you is that you will still continue to see those reduction in services. However, you'll also not see any increase in assessments. And all future assessment rates will be informed by the Prop 218 process, because we still plan to do that in any of the options that we move forward with. We'll still do the Prop 218 process, and we'll still ask our consultant to provide us with the new engineer's report, which may either during 22-23 or 23-24, whenever that is complete, that'll inform those assessments at that time. For comparison purposes, I'm going to just extract columns fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23, so I can give you a side-by-side comparison of what it would look like based on if we, kept moving forward with these reduced services, or if we brought those services up in 21-22, or for the remainder of 21-22 and in 22-23. Right here on the left, that's just that extraction of those two columns there. Those are the same numbers there. But if we were to increase to full level of services, meaning pre-January 2022, what we were receiving in 2021, we have to take into, again, we have to consider that these costs for services may not be the same. This estimate right here, this $330,000 estimate, is roughly based off of the costs that we paid in 2021, plus a 30% inflator. I know that sounds really high, but we do think that that's actually necessary, just given the trend in costs for these types of services citywide and statewide. So we're looking at the same revenues for this year, because we haven't increased the assessments yet. So $270,000 revenues, expenses of about $330,000, which includes the full landscape services and our Prop 218 costs, which gives us a net of negative $60,000 for this year. If council chooses any of the options that give us the full community engagement proceedings, so the next 12 to 18 months will complete the community engagement plus the Prop 218 process. That'll extend us into fiscal year 22-23. This assumption here, this $270,000 revenue, is assuming we did not complete the Prop 218 process in fiscal year 21-22. Our expenses will be about $365,000, and our net will be negative $95,000 for that year. So Total, we'll need about $155,000 to be covered either by a loan or a contribution. Now, obviously, if this is covered by a contribution, then that means no change for your assessments, at least until we get the new engineers report and new Prop 218 vote, going, and everybody decides on how to move forward that way. But we can bet at minimum that we'll need at least $155,000. Now, if council directs staff to proceed with the loan option and a loan of $155,000 is made to the district, then this amount will be rolled into future assessments. At this time, we don't know what the repayment plan will be, whether that will be, if we take a loan out in 21-22, we'll have to pay that back in 22-23 and so on. Or if we're going to be given, a 5-year repayment period, that's not determined at this time, but at least we know the total amount is going to be $155,000 about, based off of our current projections and estimates, plus interest. I can move into North Cordelia. For North Cordelia, I will follow about the same format, give you the same types of information. I'll probably go a little bit quicker since you guys have the base information here. So for North Cordelia, these rates were established between 1996 and 2015. There's different zones in this district. So depending on when the zone was actually annexed to the district, that's when these rates were established. All parcels are currently being assessed at the max amount in their range. So we have these various zones here, Citation and Pult. I hope I'm saying that correctly. They're at their max in their range of $180. We have per year. We have Hidden Meadows, Village Oaks, and the JO developments. Those are all at the max of their ranges as well this current fiscal year. Those 3 developments do have a CPI, an annual CPI inflator built in. So those assessments do go up each year, or up or down, just depending on what the CPI is. And then all other districts are about $170,000. $170 per year. All in all, assessments are at about $605,000 per year currently. For the last 5 years, similar to LLMD number 11, expenses have exceeded revenues anywhere from a very tiny $120 in 16-17 to a very large $155,000 in fiscal year 17-18. So similarly, in earlier this year, in June of this year, the proposal to reduce services in order to make sure that our revenues exceeded our expenditures rather than the other way around was made, to give us that cushion and to actually bring our fund balance back to the black. And let me show you what I mean by that. Similar to number 11, this is our 5-year chart. And you'll notice that in fiscal year 2021, we actually ended the fiscal year with a negative $41,000 fund balance. So with the proposal in June to reduce services, not only were we just trying to make sure that we were, had enough year over year to meet, enough revenue year over year to meet the annual expenditures, we also needed to make up for that deficit in the previous year. So we proposed, the $635,000 revenues. Again, no delinquencies. We have all the new developments built in there, general fund contributions. We proposed $570,000 in expenses in 21-22 and about $600,000 in 22-23. That left us with some good cushion and some good fund balance. I'll go ahead and pull out that same last 2 columns for comparison purposes. If we were to bring the services up to pre-January 2022 levels. If we were to do that here in 21-22, finish out this year with the same levels as we had before we reduced them, we're looking at expenses of about $640,000 with the same, $635,000, revenue estimates. We have to factor in that negative fund balance because we do need to make sure that we bring our fund balance back up to a positive level. That actually leaves us with a total deficit of about $46,000, and then a $60,000 deficit in fiscal year 22-23, for a total required loan or contribution of about $106,000. Again, if it's covered by contribution, then there's really no effect to the assessments until we receive the engineer's reports from the consultants, and that kind of informs what our new assessments will be. However, if it is a loan, then this $106,000 will be wrapped into future assessments, either the following fiscal year or on a repayment plan of some sort. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this during number 11, but it applies to both. So I apologize if I didn't mention it during number 11. But if the Prop 218 vote fails, meaning property owners reject this increase in assessments in order to meet the higher level of services, and the district has received a loan of any amount, in order to repay that loan, then the services would have to be reduced even further in order to repay that loan, if it's not approved, if the increase in assessments are not approved. So that's also one risk that's the district sort of takes on if the Prop 218 vote does fail. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully I know, following David and the legal aspect of it, hopefully this kind of clears it up a little bit. Staff is bringing all these options to council on February 1st, and then we can have more information for you at that time, or after that time.
So you guys can hear me okay. So thanks, Chris, for running through that, and David as well. That was very detailed, and there's a lot to cover there. So the city understands, the visual impacts and caused by these reductions in a low level of maintenance and the concerns the community is bringing today. So as it relates to the current and the potential projected assessment levels. With that understanding, one of the best ways we can help everyone is to provide up-to-date information about the assessment, the Prop 218 process, and any next steps going forward after the February 1st council meeting. So I encourage everyone, if you haven't done so already, please be sure to sign up for the updates that is on the website. It's shown here, and I'll just read it: www.civicmike.com/Fairfield. So this is a key element that we're going to be using as we go through this to receive any surveys or information on future meetings. There again, that's key for this process. So that actually concludes our formal presentation. I know there's been quite a bit of information, and Maurice's on the call here to help us kind of sift through the questions and answer portion. And if there again is an opportunity to speak, Marisa will promote you or go through that process. So I think with that, I'll just pass it on to Marisa, and we could start the Q&A.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you. I really appreciate your engagement this afternoon or this evening. I'm going to open it up for anyone who would like to go ahead and raise their hands. We do have, I see so far, 22 questions queued in the Q&A at this time. There are a number from anonymous parties, and I'm more than happy to read those out loud. And I imagine some of those are some of the tougher questions. So I'm happy to go ahead and just alternate. Maybe let's do 2 or 3 hand raised based on the desire to speak, and then I'll go ahead and toggle over to the Q&A. I do also know that there's a bunch of quasi questions and comments in the chat, so I'd ask you to go ahead and redirect some of that to the Q&A or raise your hand so we can be sure to address it all. And at this time, I do see Mr. Johnson. I'm going to go ahead and press allow to talk, and I believe that you would be able to unmute yourself at that time. So I'll do that now. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much. And there are a total of 41 residents on this call, my understanding. Is that correct?
So what I will say is I show now 40 attendees, and that does not include the actual panelists. And of those attendees, I believe we have about 2 or 3 that are additional staff members. So let's just guesstimate like 35 to 38 or so residents.
Okay. Again, our district here at District 11, we have 1,097 home sites that are present. My quick comment, and again, this is the introduction meeting, so I understand we want to frame the situation that we have. And you've done a good job of presenting what will be the fix to get us out of where we are right now. The most important conversation is, how did we get to where we are, and how can we use that information to go forward to form the long-term plan that a 218 answer needs to provide to the residents in the form of a new assessment number. In other words, our assessment numbers are a range of numbers. District 11 started at $90 to $190. That was our range. It was taken up to the 190. The 218 process, and let me say this up front, let me tell all my other residents, I'm in favor of our taxes going up. We need to be paying more money. We need to take care of the landscaping that is here and make it look as good as we are used to or better. But the process going forward is not just how do we get to next year? And that's really all I heard tonight. What we need to be working on is how do we get to 20 and 30 years down the road? So as we go forward, I'm just looking for the next level, and I'm sure that's the next step. I'm hoping you can encourage me on this one, Ryan, that the next meetings are exactly that, in which we are going to talk about what do we need to do to get 20 to 30 years out? How do we need to alter to come up with a good range of assessments, a new one? The first one was established in 1989, but we need a new one that'll get us to where we can take care of our landscape and it won't be dying, and we'll be proud to live here. Separate issue also is, as we go into the 218, we have areas that need to be excluded. We have areas that we enjoy and areas that we do not, and we're paying for them all. The freeway has got landscaping along the side of it. We don't enjoy that. Everybody else does, so that's a general, but it's included within our district and has approximately 350 trees and about 5 times that many plants located there. And Manuel Campos, another general arterial roadway, is in our we pay for district, and it needs to be removed and put into a general obligation situation because we specifically do not enjoy that. So going forward, I applaud you guys. I know you're going to do a good job. You try really hard. I've worked with you already, and I'm encouraged that we're going to come up to a good answer. But the bottom line is we've got to come up with an answer that's going to go 20 to 30 years out. And we need to go after the tough numbers. And I'm right there with you. And again, I told you, I'm voting for a new tax. We need to pay more money. We've got great landscaping, and I want it to stay that way. I want it to look even better. There are areas around the city that are not as good looking as we are, and I want to not go in that direction. I appreciate the time tonight. And I do look forward to working with everybody going forward, because when we all work together, we come up with the best answers. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I show Mr. Gary.
Let me just address a few of those points. I was taking notes, Marisa, and thank you for the feedback, Mr. Johnson. So you may have heard Chris mention it a few times that the city has engaged a consultant, NBS, to help us with this assessment and evaluate our current needs and the future projected needs. So a couple quick things. So we are going to be bringing to council on February 15th a new contract that's targeted and focused to doing some of this work that you're describing. I heard, what is this special and general benefit as it relates to Manuel Campos and along that freeway. So that is a part of the MBS contract. They are going to specifically look at the proposed improvements, the maintenance and services, the locations and types of improvements, and special benefits that they receive. So we're going to have MBS look at that work specifically for us and work in concert with our city attorney's office to evaluate that. So when we come back to the residents again, our intent is to have a better definition of that special versus general along Manuel Campos. Also, too, we are going to try to right size the amount of maintenance to the costs, and that is difficult to project. But we want working closely with Chris and our operations team to make sure that we could build in that contingency so that it is solvent. These districts are solvent, and as it relates to ongoing maintenance. I think I've addressed most two of those things, but if more things trickle in, looks like Paul wants to chime in.
Yeah, I can just add a little bit to that, Ryan, and Mr. Johnson. One of the things I think that Chris mentioned as well is certain districts here that we talked about tonight, or areas, specific areas, and other districts within the city have a built-in inflator or CPI. And some of those districts, because of that reason, are more solvent and they're in better shape financially, because over time, as costs have increased for labor and materials, the range of that can be assessed has also increased with that. And so as we look to develop a new rate, an assessment level, the proposal will include that sort of inflator so that we can provide for the future over time.
I show two additional hands. I'll take these questions and then I'll go over to the Q&A. I see a caller by the name of John. John, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm raising my hand because I do not want to see a tax increase. Not all of us have undisposable income. I'm a federal employee. I get very limited raises. They don't keep up with inflation here in California, particularly close to the Bay Area. An increase that's significant, which I'm still not clear exactly what the increase is going to be. I can't keep up with that. And I'm on a one-income family here. So something like that could actually force me out of my home. And I want to know if that's a consideration here, because when we moved in, we had an agreement on how much we were going to be paying in taxes, knowing that, you can't be raised. They can only be raised a certain amount every year. We've had to deal with a school tax increase that was voted on previously that raised our taxes up to, I think it was $400 annually. We've had increases every year consistently within the law of the I think it's 1.5% that's allowed under the proposition. But this is another increase, and I understand that you didn't, it wasn't planned for as far as the amount of cost needed for the work being done. I don't really want to see the quality go down or the maintenance go down, but I can't afford an increase. An increase could significantly hamper my quality of life and whether I could even stay here in Fairfield. I'm a veteran. I serve my country honorably. I work hard. I'm a good neighbor. I don't want to be forced out of my home.
Yeah, I'll just respond very briefly to that, and thank you for your service. Yeah, that's the challenge at hand, right? Is the costs are continue to increase to provide the level of maintenance that I believe most residents enjoy and want to see continue. But something has to give, right? And so either the level of maintenance needs to be reduced, or if the community wants to see the level of maintenance maintained, or for that matter, increased, then the costs are going to have to go up along with that. So eventually the vote will go to the residents to provide their thoughts on what the assessment should be in the future.
So if the vote, how much is, so a couple questions. One, what is the increase exactly going to be per resident per year? And second question is, so if enough residents decide they want the increase because they're afraid that there will be a decrease in services, I know you're saying there'll be a decrease in services, then is basically I'm forced to pay that increase regardless of the fact that I can't afford it. I'm just forced into it because of whoever votes it in, just like the school tax that was voted in a while back for $400 increase annually. Is that correct?
I can go ahead and address the assessment rate increase at this time, and especially since we don't have that new engineer's report in front of us. It's very hard to pinpoint the exact increase, but for Paradise Valley, we're estimating at this time, if we go with the assumptions that we presented here today, an increase of up to 40% of your assessment. Either in fiscal year 22-23 or 23-24. We have not gone any further than that because, again, we do need to look at the engineer's report, reevaluate the special versus general benefit, reevaluate the improvements and services that the district is maintaining. So that's the reason that wasn't presented today, but best estimate we have right now is up to 40% increase.
So
I'm at-
from 190 to about another $150 on top of that, roughly
Yeah. Let's see.
annually.
Yeah, so probably about 270, yeah, 70,000 or $270 per year.
Okay. And I did have a question too about, we have some other neighbors through here. They recently built a whole bunch of new homes back here at the retirement community, Paradise Valley Estates. So in this Paradise Valley area, we share neighbors with the Paradise Valley Estates retirement community plus the golf course. And I'm just wondering how much the golf course and the retirement community are going to be paying, because they are a huge chunk of this community over here. And the maintenance hugely benefits the people who go to the golf course from all over, even outside of Fairfield. You have Fairfield residents, obviously, that use it, but it benefits them hugely. And I'd like to know how much of an increase they're going to be paying, because I think they should pay their fair share.
Yes, the retirement community is included in the current assessments. The golf course is not currently included, but that is something we will have NBS take a look at, that entire area, just to confirm that we have everybody who should be paying assessments, is paying assessments. And then again, that the general fund contribution is right-sized.
Okay, I appreciate that. I feel like the golf course should pay their fair share. I mean, they are a huge chunk of property over here, and that people pay large amounts of money to, and I'm sure they pay a fair bit of taxes too, but they should pay their fair share, because honestly, when people are golfing over there, it's a benefit to them to have a nice quality view from there of the maintenance and the landscaping. It benefits people actually visiting the golf course, I think.
John, thank you for your comments this evening. I'm going to go ahead and move along to a couple of other, we have 2 other hands raised and about 29 questions queued at this time. And I want to make sure that we give everyone some time to speak this evening. So thank you.
Thank you.
Real quickly, Marisa, on that note, just trying to do a back of the napkin calculation while we're talking. So if we're talking a 40% increase, it's about $76 to about $270, like you alluded to, Chris. So, okay, go ahead, Marisa.
So I show, I believe it's Mr. Carmody. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So a couple of things, which already was touched on. Did your revenue include the new residents at 360 and the Ridge at apparently, because that's like 120 new residents.
Yes.
That would help out a little bit, right?
Yes, it does include them.
Did you take that into consideration?
Yes, it does.
Revenue. Okay. My next question. So we have a geographic hazard district, Paradise Valley. We have a $1.67 million reserve. We'd love to, can we loan, this is for the attorney, can we loan that money to help the landscape? We got lots of money to loan because we've been over assessed for 10 years. Go ahead and think about that. I have one more. When I walk down Paradise Drive and these large limbs, who's liable if somebody gets hit with one of these large limbs? Who's liable?
So this is David Lim, the city attorney. I'm sorry, so I want to get clarification. Are you saying that which funds were you referring to? Where there's a
surplus? The funds I'm referring to is the Paradise Valley Maintenance and Monitoring, GHAD, Geographic Hazard District. There's there's over 2, Enclave, Couple Circle, the Ridge, 360 are all part of that. We're assessed. And we've built up a reserve of over $1.67 million sitting there.
So the short answer to your question is no. The Street and Landscaping Lighting Act. Hold on, sir. I'm trying to answer your question. You want me to answer your question?
Please.
Okay. Sorry. All right. There may be a little delay, so I apologize if we're talking over each other. That's not my intent. The short answer is no, because the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972, plus the resolution passed by the council, only envisions the use of general fund money and not any other special districts. There was some questions that staff considered about using things like the geological hazard district or some water fund districts. I think it would be a slippery slope and be dangerous for the city in terms of liability, because the case law that interprets Prop 218 and the use of funds for landscaping and lighting envisions a general fund. So, I can't say with 100% certainty you couldn't do it, but as an attorney, my strong recommendation would be not to, because it could expose the city to legal challenges.
Liability about a tree limb falling, walking down Paradise Drive.
And again, I'm going to ask you to clarify that. Can you just repeat that question about who is liable for that?
Correct. If, a lot of us residents, we walk along Paradise Drive, and these trees all need, by the way, to be trimmed back. I just did mine on my own lot, $300 for one tree. So who's liable if somebody gets hurt, one of those limbs? They're falling all the time.
So to answer that question, that would be, if it was a city tree, then the city would be subject to a claims under the Government Claims Act if someone were injured by a tree limb falling that was a city tree. Anytime there's an injury on city property, the city is going to be subject to a claims act under the Government Claims Act. Who is ultimately liable, of course, is going to be, up to the lawyers and the courts to figure out who ultimately is liable. But I think the question you're asking is, does the city have some potential liability? The answer is yes.
So would that be a cause for general fund money to come in and trim these trees?
Without getting into the legal aspect of that, I do know that the engineer's report contemplates, what is a general fund benefit, or a general benefit, thereby requiring a general fund contribution to the district. So David earlier mentioned the resolution 91-213B, which does talk about general fund contribution to maintain some of the main arterials and medians and landscaping and the main arterials. So currently, when we get the new engineer's report, we'll have those numbers for you, but it is considered in the setup of these districts.
I would think general fund consideration because of liability issues, as Mr. Lim said. I have one more comment. Thank you all. You have a tough job to do. I really appreciate it. And I love the comment about the golf course. I'm against increasing. I'm not going to pay another dime in taxes. I'm tired of being overtaxed, tax. I would love to have this pristine golf course surrounded by a third world crappy Paradise Drive, just as anyway, just to show off Fairfield. Anyway, good night. And again, thank you for what you do. You have a tough job. Good night.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Mr. Garretson, and then I'll move along to the Q&A section. So give me one moment, please. Thank you. Mr. Garretson, please unmute.
Hi, guys. Interesting conversation. So I'm kind of curious. It sounds like the chicken isn't baked here. I don't understand the mapping. So if there's a specific general fund that pays for lighting, trimming, etc., and then there's a specific Paradise Valley LLMD so I would like to understand, have you guys looked at this map? Are you paying for maintenance out of the LMD 11 for things that should be paid for out of the general fund? That's just one question. And my next question is, why didn't this come back to us in 2017? You guys are on the right track, but why didn't you come and ask and do what you're talking about right here in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21? Okay.
I'll just jump in on the second question, Mr. Garretson. That's the problem that we're working to correct. And so as staff that are on board now, and we've been able to devote attention, the appropriate amount of priority and attention to this issue. We've worked hard, and Chris and Ryan and others included are working hard to come up with solutions to correct this issue and then present them to the residents as well as the city council. And so, yeah, it is an issue. It's an issue that was identified too late, and we're doing our best to provide some corrective measures to fix it now and going forward.
So your answer was to cut the services rather than continue it and start these conversations.
Well, unfortunately, at the time that we understood the level of deficit, the best course of action was to reduce services in the short term until such time that we could go through the process, including the 218 process to potentially increase assessments to cover the costs.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think you should have done exactly what you're doing right here, continue the service. You know, taxes are our way of life. We all understand that. And we understand that sometimes you're going to pay a little bit more. But you guys haven't even went through the assessment to understand what it is we're really paying for. So I'm going to stop because we got more questions.
Thank you so much.
And sir, I don't think we answered your first part of your question. Do you want to repeat that? You asked a question.
Yeah, so I would like to see a map. I keep asking this question. I want to see a map. What is, got to go back to my notes here. Your attorney drove me nuts. I was falling asleep. But I did listen. I heard general versus specific. So under the general fund, you guys pay for it out of the general fund. Specific is for Paradise Valley. So I want to see a map. What, out of my $190 or soon to be $276, what am I paying for? If I'm paying for manual compass, that's under the general. I don't enjoy manual compass. I want to see a map.
So to answer your question, sir, I think you're asking two different questions, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to answer your question as best as I can. So a map is going to show you the specific district, right? And it's going to show you all the parcels and properties that are encompassed in the district. But in terms of, to answer your second question about how much you're paying, that is done through an engineer's report. And this is where it does get tricky. And I don't blame you for falling asleep while I was talking, because it is like sort of, it is not fun. It is not a fun discussion. It's a very complicated set of tax rules and sort of assessments that they put on through Prop 218. Basically what happens is through an engineer's report, an engineer is required to do an assessment to figure out which parcels have a special benefit conferred upon them and which ones have general benefits. And then each property is given a proportionate share of the special benefit based on the amount of benefit they derive according to the engineer. It's not an exact science, even though you use the word engineer. I'll read you exactly how the courts interpret it, and I hope I don't put you to sleep again, but it says, an agency which proposes to levy an assessment shall identify all parcels which will have a special benefit conferred upon them and upon which an assessment will be imposed. The proportionate special benefit derived by each identified parcel shall be determined in relationship to the entirety of the capital cost of a public improvement, the maintenance and operation expenses of a public improvement, or the cost of the property related service being provided. No assessment shall be imposed on any parcel which exceeds the reasonable cost of the proportional special benefit conferred on that parcel. Only special benefits are accessible, and an agency shall separate the general benefits from the special benefits conferred on a parcel. So that's a very legalistic way of saying the engineer is tasked with a very difficult, subjective, and quite frankly, the courts admit that it's a subjective task of saying, okay, if you live in this area as opposed to this area, the special benefit of having increased maintenance in this district, you have a proportionate benefit, which is 10% of the benefit, whereas somebody, let's say, living in a different area where maybe the landscaping affects their property more, is going to have a 30% benefit. When it comes time to a vote, each property owner is going to get a vote proportionate to the amount that has been identified by the engineer. So not everybody's vote. This isn't like a one man, one vote in a general election. At a 218 proceeding, each person's, and I see someone wrote Zzz, so I'm going to try to go faster. I apologize. I know I'm I'm really sorry, but that's my job. I'm sorry. Everybody's vote is going to be based on a proportion based on that engineer's report. And, you know, people can reach out to me and I'm happy to chat with you offline. If you are really interested in this, I'm happy to chat with you about 218, but to keep everyone awake and keep this thing moving, I'm going to stop there. But please, if you have additional questions, you can reach out to us through our website and call the city attorney's office, and I'm happy to chat with you some more. But I'll keep my answer shorter at this point.
Well, let's get back to the questions that have come in on the chat.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So at this time, we have about 37 questions, and I know that we had indicated a 2-hour meeting. So we're going to try to commit to that, recognizing that we may not be able to answer all of the questions in this format. There will be the opportunity for us to capture them and to follow up via a written document of some sort, whether that's some type of frequently asked questions or something to that effect. And I did just confirm that with Mr. Panganiban. That is something that we will be able to do. The turnaround time on that, I would imagine, would be at least a couple of days to a week, just to ensure that we capture everything. With that said, I will indicate that probably some of these questions have already been addressed. So I will go ahead and start reading some questions. The first one: who is managing the landscape company contract? It seems we should be working with the contractor and change the way they do the services. We could reduce their costs, but make sure they keep up with the landscape as we are used to. This is a simple contract negotiation.
So I could feel that one, Marisa. And so it's a bit of a blend here at Public Works. And so the negotiation, the contract takes place, and that's why I have both my operation landscape maintenance supervisors on the call. So we work in tune. Chris and myself work in tune to lay out what the scope of work is, what's envisioned through the maintenance, the weed, when we have to do, high mowing and blowing and leaf pickup, and the frequency in which we do that. And then we do go through a process. So we do procure quotes, three quotes from qualified, contractors that are reputable. And then based on those, we go with the most qualified or best value contract. And that's what the process that we did at this most recent contract with New Image. So hopefully that addressed the question. And I don't know if Chris or Richard have any color to add. Okay, go ahead, Marisa.
Next question: why is District 11 paying to maintain manual campos outside of our subdivision and property off of I-80?
At the time the district was formed, it was determined that this area would be used, the people living in the Paradise Valley area would drive down Manual Campus to get to their subdivision. And then of course there would be other passersby and people getting from one side of the town to the other. But it was determined at the time during that, with the engineer that created that engineer's report, that this did provide benefit to the district, and that's why it was included. With this new engineer's report, there's not really any way to tell whether or not it will be included, but just by, and actually, I don't even want to make any assumptions. It's not known at this time if it will be included.
Next question: will these slides be made available after the town hall?
Yes, it will be posted on the Civic Mike website, available for review, as well as the recording of this meeting.
Next question: what is the $70,000 going for in District 11? Why is it going up and not at 28% of the budget? I'll restate the question. What is the $70,000 going for in District 11? Why is it going up and not at 28% of the budget?
I'm sorry, I'm not really sure what the $70,000 is referring to. And if we're referring to the $60,000 loan for the fiscal year 21-22 to finish out the remainder of fiscal year 21-22, that would be to increase the level of service, landscape services back to the pre-January 2022 levels. Also pay for the Prop 218 costs. That's what that $60,000 loan or contribution would cover. And then similarly, those same costs, those same categories of costs for fiscal year 22-23, but that loan amount or contribution amount will be $95,000. So I'm not, I hope that addresses the question. I'm not really sure of the $70,000.
Chris, I show Mr. DeSalt is raising his hand, and he's the person who posed this question. I'll allow him to talk, but I will ask that we limit it to just 2 minutes so that I can return back to the Q&A. So 1 moment.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Thanks for taking my question. So the $70,000 in question is what's in the budget. I got a copy of the budget, and the city administrative fees, salaries, PERS are all added up to $70,000 that we're paying, and we'd like to know what we're paying for. Thank you.
So that salaries, all the salaries and benefits, that includes a little bit of my time, Richard Vasquez's time and his team at the operations division, a little bit of Ryan's time as overseeing the program. And when I say a little bit, I do mean, 2 to 4% of our time, as there's 16 landscape districts plus, some of the other regular work that we do. Richard and his team oversees, other areas of the city. So that's, some of its general funds, some of its special, funds. But it's about 2 to 4%. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. And that's what that pays for. There is the county admin expenses, which of course that's charged to us by the county for sending the tax bills, collecting that, and then transferring that over to the city. And we have the cost allocation, which is the city's overhead. So our accounting, our finance team, city manager's office, HR, all of that's kind of wrapped in. That is a very complicated formula. I heard that the book to establish that is like probably this big. So I don't have any exact figures on that, but that is what those general administrative costs go towards.
Before I go on to the next question, I will ask if anyone does have a question that they posed in the chat function and not in the Q&A, please take time now to type that in so that we can be sure to capture that. Since there's been so much commentary and just general statements happening in the chat, we won't be able to sort through all those questions. So please take the time remaining in the meeting to transfer over to the Q&A section. The next question is, are all residents paying the same amount going forward, which is what the council asked to happen?
I don't, sorry, Ryan, do you want to go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, no, I think that might have been from previous discussions as it relates to the Paradise Valley Maintenance and Monitoring District. I think not to be confused with the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance District. This is the first presentation that we've made on, this is the first town hall or community meeting that we've made. As it relates, I do know that, as Chris alluded to, a majority of the residential units, or not a majority, the residential units within 11 pay that $190. That's the fixed amount versus the commercial. It does vary, and we could provide that information, Chris. I think as it relates to the budget and as it relates to the assessment number and the number of homes and stuff, that's something that we could put as a resource onto our Civic Mic, and we should get that up shortly.
Yeah, if it's not already up there, it's also on the city's website. It was adopted in June and July of this year. So a full listing of all the parcels and their assessment amounts is attached to the engineer's report along with the budget. That's available for anybody to look up on the city council website. If you just go to, I think it's archived agendas or previous agendas, or you'll find it there.
Next question. Why wasn't this addressed years ago when you saw funding shortages?
I can take that one, and I can think I've kind of tried to answer that already a little bit earlier. But I mean, essentially, that's the problem that we're working to correct. It'd be difficult to go back and try to figure out why it wasn't addressed. But I think I'm confident now we have the right team in place that you see here today, as well as our consultant team that you'll meet further down the road here to correct this and stay engaged with you as we come up with those options.
Next question, and this may be one that was already addressed. What is included in the monthly inspection reports? I am assuming this is what we are paying for in the 70,000.
Richard or Gary, would you guys mind just giving a brief summary of what's included in the monthly inspection reports?
So the monthly inspection report is generated by the landscape inspector, the City of Fairfield landscape inspector, and that just calls out any work that is required for that month, or any work that is, work that is scheduled, work that's required, or work that's needs to still be completed. So our landscape maintenance contractors, they're in the areas with the landscape maintenance inspectors. They're in the areas daily. However, they do meet twice a month with the contractor and look at the areas. And again, they note any work that's required or deficient.
And to answer the second part of that question, the salaries and benefits, yes, it does cover Richard and his team to be out on site to oversee those the landscape contractor.
Next question. Why is the management portion of the tax going up? You're now using 28% of the budget. Why?
This just includes the salaries and benefits for the staff that work on these districts, especially as Paul, alluded to. We're especially diving into these deep reviews, working with our consultants, and trying to make sure that we are, having a little more oversight. Working with the consultant to create this new engineer's report in the Prop 218. So that's what those expenses are for.
Next question. Anyone from the city driven down Paradise Valley Drive from Enclave entrance to the west side to see the current landscaper is not doing what the new contract states? Who is managing this?
Richard, you want to field that one?
As I mentioned earlier, we have a landscape inspector assigned to the area, and they are in the area daily. So I'll have to look into that specific area where the question was and where the question was referring to.
Thank you. Next question. If we do 1A loan, who manages the funds?
If the district receives a loan, those funds will just be rolled into the overall district fund and will be utilized by our landscape contractors. Basically, it will go to just pay the landscape contractor, because that's the only reduction in service that we included in the reduced budget. So it will be overseen by myself. Ryan, our finance department, is a partner with us that reviews these, on a monthly, quarterly, semi-annual basis. So it'll be between us here in engineering and finance.
Okay, before I go into the next question, just a quick time check. So we've answered 10 questions so far, and we have 53 that are open. As indicated, we do have a hard stop at 7 this evening, so we will be capturing these and answering to the best of our abilities. And there may be the request for some clarification. Next question. What is the process for the property owner vote on assessment level? At regular election or letters to property owners?
It's done by letters to property owners. And I'm going to say, that's all I'm going to say. Because
Next question. I am happy to pay a little more to have better services, as long as all are paying the same and we have say so in how much the money is spent. So I guess that's more of a comment. Next question, how do commercial properties contribute to these funds? There are a lot of new commercial properties being built in North Cordelia area, which will impact roads, etc.
This will be considered in the new engineer's report. There are currently some commercial properties are paying into the district, but of course, if any have not been annexed and the engineer deems necessary, then we will include those in the future makeup of the district.
Next question. If expenses have been exceeding revenues for several years, why haven't residents been informed and plans been put in place to increase assessment?
I think that one's called.
Yeah, I think we've answered that one.
Okay. Who is responsible for the overspending? Where did that money go?
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize it as overspending. I think just expenses have outpaced revenues. And most of the costs have gone to landscape maintenance, water consumption, and a little bit towards staff costs, administrative costs.
Have you considered changing the landscape to be more drought tolerant, less lawn, and more low maintenance trees? This seems to be more cost effective for the long term, reducing landscape maintenance and water.
I think these alternatives, I mean, we could go through that. That is a one-time capital expense that we would have to invest in. And that scenario is something we could explore with MVS as we go through this new engineer's report and assessment level. So that's a point taken and noted.
Next question. I understand from Christina Lewis's presentation that single-family residential parcels and retirement home units are assessed the LLMD. How are multifamily units and commercial parcels / units assessed? They certainly benefit.
That is correct. They do benefit. So the retirement community I'm speaking of is in the Paradise Valley LLMD number 11. So that is assessed at a per unit rate at $190 per unit, same as a single family residential unit in the district. In the North Cordelia area, it's just by zone, and each commercial property, I believe, I'd have to double check on this, but I believe that these commercial properties are assessed by square footage. That again is established in the engineer's report. So it's they call it an equivalent benefit unit. And there's a whole calculation behind how they come up with these EBUs, and each commercial property is assigned a number of EBUs. That is based off of their square footage.
Thank you. For the record, the next question was from John, who did speak in response to the cost increase potentially impacting him. So I'm going to go ahead and consider that answered since staff did engage that question. Next question, where is the city manager and public works director?
I'm Paul Kasha, I'm the public works director, so I've been here. City attorney is here, David Lim, and city manager is on the call as an attendee listening in as well.
Next question, with the increase in residential, multifamily, residential, and commercial development along Business Center Drive, why is there not additional revenue available to support the LLMD?
That is just due to the increase in costs for these same services that we've been receiving, increase in costs for labor, materials, water, and the like.
So the next question is actually a series of probably guesstimating around 10 to 15 questions for Mr. James Goodall. So James, we're going to go ahead and address those via written response and try to leverage some of these other quicker questions. Can you please advise of the interest rate that will be applicable to the potential loan?
So the resolution from 1991 only mentions that the loan shall be paid with interest. It doesn't indicate the rate of interest to be applied. So that would be a decision left up to the council on what, if any, interest rate they wanted to assess on a loan.
So I believe this one was already answered, but I'll just confirm, how much will the increase be? How much does the golf course or retirement community in Paradise Valley pay?
We do not have an exact number of how much the increase will be. And I don't have in front of me how much the retirement community pays. The golf course does not currently pay into the district. But in the engineer's report, if we don't answer this, if we don't respond via email, or you don't want to wait, that's also at the end of the engineer's report, which was adopted in July of this calendar year, of 2021. And you can see the parcel and the amount that was assigned to that parcel.
Okay, I think the next one is more of a comment, but I'll read it for the record. General versus special benefits should also be reviewed along Sassoon Valley Road. Next question, does the city conduct a regular bidding process to hire landscaping contractors?
Yeah, I think Ryan answered that one earlier.
Okay, for the record, I see just a comment of $76, then another comment of $190 plus 76 equals 266. It's just a series of comments, so they don't seem to be connected here. It's just essentially talking about the golf courses owned by the city. I think it was more of a internal conversation. Next question, why is the Manuel Campos Parkway part of the Paradise Valley district? I believe that was addressed. Was that addressed? Yes. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go and answer two more questions, and then I previously indicated that we would wrap up the additional questions, and I believe probably the best spot to put it would be on the Civic, is it Civic Mike, that website? That's where we'll put it as an accessible document. So the last two questions that I'll take here is to the lawyer, can a program comply with 218 and reduce the services that were originally stated in the program?
So 218 is just the mechanism by which you assess homeowners the fee based on the programs. In order to change the district and the scope of the program would actually be by resolution by the council to change the assessment district. And you can follow up with me if that made no sense. And I'm happy to talk to you some more.
Okay, final question. How will the city of Fairfield prevent the threat of wildfires that may increase by the neglect of maintenance / landscape in these areas?
So high mowing along that area, that's still included as part of the current contract. So that will be continued. That's not going to stop. So just a quick time check. So we're 2 minutes in, and I do want to kind of wrap us up. And I know this has been a lot to sit through, and there has been a lot of good discussion as we work through some of that, some of the topics and for conversation. Everyone can see that okay. I wanted to leave this up as we continue to this conversation and we continue to engage the residents. I want to make sure that I put this up for us to kind of talk through. So the Civic Mike website, one more plug, www.civicmike.com/Fairfield. If there's any questions or follow-up, I know David had put his David Lemon put his conversation out there that he'd be open to calls. But I would encourage you to call 1-800-676-7516. That is the main line for NBS, who we've contract. Those calls get tracked and we go through a process, and we will be looking towards other documents to put onto this webpage as well. And that contact information, contact@civicmike.com, as well as the email. So thank you again for participating in the meeting tonight, and I hope everyone enjoys the evening.
Hey, Ryan, just before we sign off, just want to say thanks again to everyone for spending time with us. Hopefully we got you out tonight in time for dinner. We definitely want to stay engaged with you, and we'll do that, as Ryan mentioned, through the Civic Mike website. Hopefully you're signed up there to receive updates. We'll let you know as we have more updates. If you're interested, you can join the city council meeting next week on the 1st to hear the council's conversation. And then, obviously, as a couple of comments have come in, this definitely is happening later than it should have. But now that we've uncovered the issues and the severity of the issues, we're working hard to correct them. And we'll stay engaged with you so that we can provide you updates along the way. So again, thanks everyone so much, and have a good evening.